Okay, hello and welcome to PJM 101. My name is Clara Summers, and today I'm going to introduce you to your grid operator, PJM, go over how it works and how you can engage. I'm campaign manager for Consumers for a Better Grid, which is a project of the Citizens Utility Board of Illinois. Consumers for a Better Grid is a watchdog that holds grid operators accountable to consumers, states, and a clean, affordable energy future. We advocate for the 65 million electric customers served by the PJM Interconnection across 13 states and the District of Columbia. Let's take a brief movie break. Transmission refers to the high voltage lines that carry electricity across the country. Behind the simple flip of a switch lies a complex power grid. These are the interstate highways of our electricity system, and they're key to keeping the lights on and transitioning to clean energy. Most people have probably never heard of an RTO, also known as a regional transmission organization. They operate our power grids, and the decisions they make have a huge impact on how clean our electricity is and the rates we pay for it. For example, let's focus in on PJM. PJM is the nation's biggest RTO. It serves 65 million electric customers in 13 states and the District of Columbia, from the Midwest to the East Coast. PJM is an essential service with the power of a government, but it's run as a private corporation. Board meetings are behind closed doors, and utilities dominate the voting membership. And remember, their decisions impact power bills and clean energy. That's where Consumers for a Better Grid comes in. We're a watchdog holding grid operators like PJM accountable to consumers, states, and a clean, affordable energy future. So you've had the less than 2-minute introduction to PJM. Let's dig deeper. First off, it's important to understand why we should even care about PJM. There are 3 main reasons. The decisions made at PJM impact the affordability, the cleanliness, and the reliability of our electric system. Even if you're doing great work at the state level to lower the cost of your electric bills or speed up the transition to a clean energy economy, decisions made at PJM can help or hinder your progress. And there you go. So before we go any further, let's make sure we're on the same page about basic terms because they will come up a lot in this presentation. Generation is the creation of electricity. Nuclear, gas, or coal plants are all generators, as are wind or solar farms. Those are just a few examples. There are many types of generation, but the point is that they are the ones creating the electricity that we use. Once electricity is created, it needs to travel to where it's used. That happens through transmission. Transmission refers to the complex network of high voltage, high capacity power lines that carry energy from generating stations or power plants to the local distribution systems that serve our homes and businesses. PJM markets and planning have to do with generation and transmission. You may be familiar with your local utility. They deal with distribution. Since generation and transmission are most relevant to PJM, that's what you'll hear about coming up the most in this presentation. Yeah. Okay, so we now know what generation and transmission are, but what does PJM do with them? PJM has 3 main jobs. Transmission planning. This means managing the flow of electricity across wires, connecting new generation to the grid, and planning the grid. PJM also manages the energy market. This means balancing supply and demand in the immediate and near term. PJM manages how energy is bought and sold each minute and each day. We aren't going to go into this much during today's presentation, but it's something to keep in mind. PJM also manages the capacity market. This means balancing supply and demand in the long term. The capacity market is an auction system to buy as much electricity as we expect to need in the longer term. These payments go to electricity generators in return for the promise that they will have enough power on hand when demand is the highest. So think a hot summer afternoon when everyone is cranking up their air conditioners and power plants are working at their hardest. Customers pay these prices through the electricity supply charge on their power bills. Capacity auctions are typically supposed to happen 3 years before the electricity is needed, but we've been off that schedule for a few years with frustrating results. And if you've been hearing about PJM drama of late, it's likely to do with high prices in the capacity market. Okay. On this rule of 3 here, there are 3 main ways that I see PJM affecting you. The first is through your bill. So if you are trying to reduce energy burden for low-income households and have become intimately familiar with utility bills, you might have done some research into the supply line items on your bill and gotten to know PJM that way. The costs of PJM's transmission planning and markets get passed through on our bills, and they've been increasing, as you can see. Keep in mind that your bill may sort the costs differently depending on which utility region you're on. This is an example for ComEd customers. Okay. The second way that you might encounter PJM is if you live near to a polluting power plant that you've been trying to shut down. One study found that over half of PJM power plants are within a mile of an environmental justice community, based on the state of Pennsylvania's definition of environmental justice. PJM markets have kept otherwise uneconomic polluting plants online. Even if the plant decides to shut down, PJM can keep it operating and polluting at extra cost to ratepayers in the name of reliability. Such a situation is playing out right now in Maryland. Okay. Finally, you might encounter PJM if you are involved with climate or environmental advocacy at the state level, and you discover that your state is having difficulty implementing its priorities without cooperation from the grid operator. So for example, PJM's interconnection queue, or the line to connect new generation to the grid, is currently the slowest in the country. This is slowing our collective clean energy transition. So how does PJM work? PJM is an essential service with the power of a government, but it operates behind the curtain. I'm going to use a lot of metaphors about Congress to explain how governance works at PJM. So think of PJM as Congress for the electric grid. Voting membership is dominated by generators, distribution utilities, and transmission owners who have an outsized influence on what decisions get made. These utilities came of age in the fossil fuel era, and their financial incentives tend to either prevent the energy transition or make it as expensive as possible. Consumer advocates are the only public interest entities that have voting rights within the PJM stakeholder process. There are 14 consumer advocate votes and over 1,000 voting members. So continuing our Congress metaphor, imagine if all the committee votes in Congress were secret and only the votes of the Senate were reported in full. Since committees act as a gatekeeper for what gets considered in the House or Senate, we need to know what happens at the committee level to make sure good ideas aren't getting killed. We can't currently do that in PJM. The vast majority of votes are secret. Some states are working to change that by introducing legislation that requires state utilities to report on the votes they take at PJM. Here you see a diagram of the PJM stakeholder process. Don't get hung up on this diagram. It's here for illustration for you to see how complicated and bureaucratic it is.
You might ask, why does it matter if votes are secret? I have an example. A while back, Hub introduced a proposal to require one member of the PJM board to have clean energy expertise. To us, this seemed pretty uncontroversial since we are currently going through a clean energy transition and existing members of the PJM board have that expertise already. The vote was going to take place in the only committee where all of the votes are reported, which is called the Members Committee. But when it came time to have a vote, Dayton Power and Light and NRG made a motion to make the vote anonymous. No one wants to publicly be seen voting against clean energy goals. After the vote was made anonymous, it failed. If something as non-controversial as having clean energy expertise is getting killed because of anonymous votes, we can only imagine what's happening with more substantive clean energy or affordability votes, which is why we want voting data to be public. At this point in the presentation, people often get frustrated. If decisions at PJM are made by industry, but I, as a consumer, pay for PJM's decisions, who do I go to for help and accountability? Who is PJM accountable to? PJM ultimately is regulated by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC. Most of the issues that PJM members vote on have to get approved by FERC. The public can intervene or comment on legal filings at FERC. And the agency also holds technical conferences and designs rulemakings that PJM and other RTOs have to follow. Anyone can comment on a rulemaking. So what can you do? There are a few ways that you can engage. A first and fairly straightforward way is to urge your state legislators to hold PJM utilities accountable. Over the past few legislative sessions, an increasing number of states have introduced legislation to require state utilities to report on their PJM votes. These states include Illinois, Indiana, Maryland, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and West Virginia. If your state is on that list, you can make the legislation one of your legislative priorities and show your state legislators that you want it passed. If your state is not on that list, you can ask your state legislator to introduce a similar bill. Cultivating PJM legislative champions can also involve asking them to hold a hearing with PJM. Also, get to know your state regulator and your state consumer advocate. So if you want to push PJM as the grid operator to have more consumer-friendly policies, it's worth your time to get to know your state regulator. In your state, that might be called the Public Utilities Commission or Public Service Commission. In Illinois, it's the Illinois Commerce Commission. Your state commission has oversight over your state distribution utility, but they also give input to PJM. Just like FERC, your state regulator holds hearings and comment periods. If you urge your state regulator to engage with PJM on proactive transmission planning, speeding up the interconnection process, and allowing renewables to participate appropriately in the market, that could be a good avenue for change. Also, if you do something good in your state, like requiring the cost-effective application of grid enhancing technologies, that can set a precedent for other states in the RTO and the RTO as a whole. If you are interested in more technical involvement, both at the state level, get involved with your regulator and support your consumer advocate, and you want to get involved at the FERC level, then you should get in touch with the Office of Public Participation at FERC. They're great folks. They're there to help you, and they can give you guidance on submitting comments on PJM issues as they come up. Finally, in general, a lot of people don't know about PJM, so you can spread the word. You can write a letter to the editor or an op-ed educating your neighbors about how PJM impacts our costs, our climate progress, and our electric reliability. Thank you for your thoughtful attention. Please check out our website to learn more, and good luck with your PJM advocacy. Together, we can advance a clean, affordable energy future.